A very good morning to all. So we will have about 15-20 minutes for each panels, and I am playing the referee, which I am not actually comfortable with, but I am asked to. Around 17-18 minute I will try to gesticulate like this so that you can round it up, and I request the students to post their questions as each and every panelist complete the presentation so that we can take it up at the end. And without much ado, I would like to really straight down. To kickstart the session, let's listen to Ray himself. It's an abridged version, a 4 minutes version of an All India Radio interview of Ray titled The Music I Live By. I just want to connect it with the idea about ideas, the idea about images, and leave it to the panelists to talk about Ray's idiom of cinema. Beethoven was a personal hero, and after hearing the first piece by Beethoven, Ray says that it did not match with the image of the rebel genius he had formed in his mind. It did not match with the image, that's what he says. Ray was not talking about the image as a photograph, I am sure, but a picture of Beethoven through the experience of listening to his music. So I would like to trigger the panelists by just touching upon the abstract world of ideas and the physical reality of image in cinema. How Ray became a master of image making, and how his cinema emit more beyond those physicality of the images. So let's first listen to Ray. Avinash, please play the clip.
An illustrated interview with Satyajit Ray. Music I Live By. The interviewer, Bulbul Sarkar.
We are delighted to have you in our studios, Mr. Rai. We are looking forward to your telling us something about your tastes in music and to your sharing your favorite records with us. Your long and abiding interest in Western music is perhaps a little known fact. How early in life did you develop a love for it?
I think I was 4 or 5 years old when I was given a pygmy-phone as a birthday present. The pygmy-phone was a toy gramophone made by the Bell Telephone Company, and the tiny records that came with it had the sign of the bell on their mauve labels. The music was mostly waltzes and marches, Blue Danube, Over the Waves, Tipperary, Stars and Stripes, and so on. And they were my first introduction to Western music. The other records in my house were mostly of Indian music, with one exception. A very large record with a red label from which the legend had almost faded. We had no gramophone in our house at that time, and it was not until my mother and I moved to my uncle's house that I had a chance to play it. It turned out to be this. Even at the age of 7, I found the music wholly and immediately captivating. This put me in a frame of mind to take in more classical music should it happen to come my way. But it didn't, until quite some years later. In the meantime, I read the lives of composers in the Book of Knowledge and set up Beethoven as a sort of personal hero. The rondo of the violin concerto didn't quite correspond to the image of the rebel genius I had formed. But the very next piece I heard, and there was a gap of 7 years between the rondo and this, fitted in exactly with that image.
It is evident that you have a discriminating taste in Western music, Mr. Rai. Are you also fond of Indian classical music?
Suppose there's a performance by Richter and a performance by Bismillah in two different theatres at the same time. And one has to make a choice between the two. Now, if Richter were playing in different compositions, I'd certainly go to Bismillah. Indian music is what the performer makes it. It's true he has to play on the basis of certain set rules, but if he is a great musician, he can elaborate and improvise on that basis. In other words, he can compose while he performs and make great music. While with Western music, even a Richter can do nothing with what is basically a second-rate conception. I suppose one has to have a sort of a split personality to respond equally to Indian and Western classical music, but perhaps not to the extent that one might imagine. Let me play a piece of classical Carnatic music which I feel would be largely acceptable to a Western listener. The Sthanam section of the Raga Kalyani, played by the South Indian violinist Dwaram Venkataswamy Naidu.
So Ray here is playing a Carnatic musician, and he says that it will be acceptable to the Western music lovers. At the same time, what he says is that a Richter playing within the notes, and if he has to decide between a Richter performance and a Bismillah performance, he will prefer to attend Bismillah, because even while performing, an Indian classical musician can compose even while performing. So I think that triggered me with the several thoughts in my mind, and I'm sure the panelists will also get provoked creatively to some extent. And here are some real giants in thoughts about cinema. You know, cinema continues to really provoke new thoughts, and new thoughts provoke new cinema. So over to the panelists on ideas, images and idioms over a cinema, and we start with the veteran Ahmad Gyanga. He is also a friend of mine. Now we go to Mr. Devashish Dev for his graphic journey into the mind of Satyajit Ray. The word graphic novel was not coined at that time. When Manikda was in a journey to India, he was traveling in the ship. This is an anecdote which is there, recorded anecdote, which is there on YouTube from Chidanand Dasgupta. So he was making a graphic version of Pather Panjali for children. While he was coming to India, he was making a graphic novel, graphic version of Pather Panjali. So from graphic to photographic take, Mr. Devashish Dev. Over to Ashok Vishwanathan. He's a veteran filmmaker, he's a film theorist, I would like to call, and he's also Dean of Film Institute, Satyajit Ray Film Institute. Ashok, just again for a trigger, I'm indebted to Chidanand Dasgupta for this entire session, geared up by watching his old interviews. When Satyajit Ray and Chidanand Dasgupta, they started the Calcutta Film Society and started discussing the films, they were very actively arguing about films for quite some time, and then after a point, according to Chidanand Dasgupta, Satyajit Ray withdrew to a kind of Mandro Gupti, which is a Bengali word, Mandro Gupti, because he started making his film Pather Panjali in his mind. So as a filmmaker yourself, can you really peep into that kind of mandro gupti of Satyajit Ray over to Ashok? So the students, I'm sure, will be interested to hear from you after Sagini's presentation. I also wanted to really get back to your analysis of the structure, the dramaturgy of Aranya Dindatri. At a very primary level, the narrative, the story is very simple. But if you really look at the bone structure of the narrative, it's not that the protagonist path he took. It's not about one person and the dramaturgy develops. It's a group. I think in Indian cinema, other than the story, the dramaturgy of Aranya Dindatri has to yet to be discussed. The way Ray himself talked about it, one of his late interviews. And over to Mr. Saginik Chatterjee. Again, this is for the students. I would like to really share this information that Ray, even today in Bengal, is the best-selling author for his Feluda stories. Ananda Basar, ABP, Ananda Basar, Ananda Publishers. Even now, Satyajit Ray tops as an author. So this is a very little known facet outside of Bengal. And Saginik had done a very, very interesting and deep film with this Feluda stories. Over to Saginik. How do you relate Satyajit Ray with the modernity and modernism? This is from Shivani Sharma. So it's the contemporaneity is not that you deal with the contemporary subjects, but the very attitude to life and art, which makes Ray a modern filmmaker even today. How do you relate Satyajit Ray with the modernity and modernism? One question, so I'll club two questions for you. The other one is what was Ray's motivation for his mind-blowing visuals in film? This is from Rishikesh Mahankar. How today's audience can still resonate with those images? It's beyond the technological modernity. The modern gadgets are not what actually modernity is. Had Ray got the drone cameras, what he would have done is an exercise which all the students can really do by studying the use of zoom lens. The moment the zoom lens was introduced, it was the much abused lens. Everybody would like to really zoom in and zoom back. Whereas if you really listen to Ray in film done by Shyam Benegal, when Shyam Benegal asked about this usage of zoom lens, it's a brilliant way of answering. Instead of the dolly, I started using the zoom lens with a point of view. Now the zoom lens is not just like that is used. What is the point of view of the drone today? Is it God's perspective? Is it God's point of view? So it's beyond the modern gadgets. Music I live by, So everything is, if you have a sense of music, you get the rhythm right, even the cutting, even for editing. If you have, so it's the abstract world of music which created these images and the idiom and idioms you can put in that way.